February 24th, 2022, 5:47 a.m. Chernihiv, Ukraine. Invasion begins. Russian forces advancing from Belarus. Multiple axes. Kiev primary target. Chernihiv secondary. Strategic location. 150 kilometers north of Kiev. Highway junction. Control Chernihiv. Threaten Kiev from north. Russian plan clear. Capture quickly. Use as staging area. Against them, Ukrainian defenders. Several thousand. Regular army. Territorial defense. Against Russian force 10,000 plus. Overwhelming odds. But Chernihiv has something else. Population 285,000. By invasion start, most evacuate. Some can't. Some won't. Eventually 40,000 trapped. Siege develops. Complete encirclement. No supplies enter. No people leave. 5 weeks. 40,000 civilians. Underground. Basements. Bomb shelters. Soviet-era bunkers. Above, constant bombardment. Artillery. Airstrikes. Missiles. Everything. City destroyed systematically. Infrastructure gone. Electricity cut. Water stopped. Heat lost. March temperatures freezing. People survive anyway. Share food. Share water. Share warmth. Share hope. Defenders fight. Street by street. Building by building. Against overwhelming force. Buying time. Every day city holds its day. Ukraine survives elsewhere. Defenders know this. Civilians know this. Everyone sacrifices. For 5 weeks. Until Russian withdrawal. Not because defeated militarily. Because strategic situation changed. Battle of Kiev failed. Northern offensive failed. Chernihiv siege becomes pointless. Siege lifts. Survivors emerge. 40,000 endured. 5 weeks hell. Emerged alive. Changed. Traumatized. But alive. This is Chernihiv. This is survival. This is what civilians endure when trapped in siege warfare. Modern warfare's reality. Humanitarian catastrophe. Strategic necessity. Human cost. All visible. All documented. All survived. By 40,000. For 5 weeks. In Chernihiv, the siege develops. Week 1. Russian forces surround city. Complete encirclement. Begin bombardment. Systematic destruction. Defenders fight back. Inflict casualties. Slow advance. Can't stop it. Russian forces enter outskirts. Urban warfare begins. Building by building. Street by street. Civilians trapped. Most in basements. Bomb shelters. Anywhere underground. Safe from artillery. Not from everything. Starvation threatened. Water becomes scarce. Medicine depleted. Week 2. Siege intensifies. Bombardment increases. More destructive. More indiscriminate. Defenders still fight. Compressed into smaller areas. City center. Historic district. Residential areas occupied. Civilians in occupied areas. Terrified. Russian soldiers everywhere. Some disciplined. Some not. Reports of violence. Of theft. Of terror. Civilians hiding. Surviving hour by hour. Week 3. Humanitarian catastrophe. No electricity. No water infrastructure. No heat. Freezing temperatures. People melting snow. Burning furniture. Sharing everything. Slowly starving. Medical situation critical. Wounded defenders can't be evacuated. Civilians with chronic conditions running out of medicine. Death toll rising. Not just from combat. From conditions. From deprivation. From siege warfare's reality. Week 4. Desperation peak. Food nearly exhausted. Water critically scarce. Medicine gone. People dying daily. Defenders still fighting. Impossibly. Against everything. Morale somehow holds. Among some. Others despairing. Everyone suffering. Week 5. End approaches. Russian forces begin withdrawing. Not because Chernihiv defeated them. Because strategic situation elsewhere demands. Kiev offensive failed. Northern Axis collapsing.
Chernihiv siege becomes liability. Tying down forces needed elsewhere. Withdrawal orders given. Russian forces leave. Gradually, defenders advance carefully. Retake city. Civilians emerge. 40,000 survived. Many more died. City destroyed. Population traumatized. But siege ended. Survived. Against everything. For 5 weeks. At 11:47 a.m. March 31st, 35 days after siege began, Ukrainian forces fully controlled Chernihiv. Russian forces withdrawn completely. Siege ended. City liberated. Casualties. Estimated 700 plus civilians dead. Thousands wounded. Infrastructure destroyed 70%. Water systems ruined. Electricity grid demolished. Roads cratered. Buildings collapsed. Survivors. 40,000. Emerged from basements. From bunkers. From hell. Traumatized. Malnourished. Some sick. All changed. But alive. Surviving 5 weeks of siege warfare.
Modern warfare's humanitarian cost. Visible completely. Documented thoroughly. Civilian suffering total. Survival improbable. Achieved anyway. Through endurance. Through sharing. Through refusing to die. Chernihiv's siege lasted 35 days. 40,000 civilians trapped. Survived impossible conditions. Emerged when Russians withdrew. Not because defeated militarily at Chernihiv. Because defeated strategically elsewhere. Siege's end was strategic decision. Not local victory. But survivors don't care why. Care that survived. That siege ended. That life continues. Despite everything. This is Chernihiv. This is siege survival. This is modern warfare's human cost. And human resilience. Both extreme. Both proven. Through 5 weeks. Through 40,000 survivors. Through impossible conditions. Through emerging alive. This is MilFront. And what happened at Chernihiv wasn't military victory. Was survival achievement against impossible odds where 40,000 civilians endured 5 weeks of siege warfare. Where bombardment was constant and supplies were absent. Where civilians survived underground in freezing temperatures without adequate food or water. Where defenders held not because could win, but because every day of resistance mattered strategically. Where siege ended not from breakthrough but from Russian strategic withdrawal. The question isn't whether Chernihiv held militarily. It did barely. Question is how 40,000 civilians survived 5 weeks under siege conditions. What enabled this impossible survival? And what Chernihiv reveals about modern siege warfare's humanitarian cost when civilians are trapped and city is destroyed, but population somehow endures until strategic situation enables liberation. Official Russian statements about Chernihiv, operational progress claims, encircling forces, eliminating resistance, never mentioned trapped civilians, never acknowledged humanitarian catastrophe, never admitted withdrawal, just silence eventually. Better not mention than explain failure. Chernihiv's siege failed strategically. City not captured. Forces withdrawn. Operation abandoned. Statements couldn't spin this. Chose silence. Evidence visible anyway. Destroyed city. Traumatized survivors. Russian failure. All documented. Ukrainian statements. Desperate appeals. Chernihiv surrounded. Humanitarian catastrophe. Civilians suffering. Continuous throughout siege. Seeking international attention. Humanitarian aid. Military relief. None possible. Siege complete. Appeals continued anyway. Documenting suffering. Preserving evidence. Creating record. Post-liberation. Heroes survived. Emphasis on civilian endurance. Defender sacrifice. Russian brutality. All accurate. All documented. All terrible. Statements reflected reality. Humanitarian catastrophe survived. Against impossible odds. Through human resilience. Stay with me. Because the detail that explains Chernihiv's survival, how 40,000 endured, is going to show you that Soviet-era infrastructure accidentally saved lives. Chernihiv has extensive basement systems, Soviet construction used deep foundations, basements everywhere. Additionally, bomb shelters, built during Cold War. Nuclear war preparation, never used as intended, used now. For conventional war survival, 40,000 people underground, protected from artillery, from airstrikes, from most bombardment. Not comfortable, not adequate, but alive. Underground survival was key. Additionally, community sharing. Food divided equally. Water shared constantly. Medicine distributed to most needy. Elderly protected. Children prioritized. Community formed under pressure. Sharing everything. This social cohesion enabled survival. Individual supplies would have exhausted quickly. Collective sharing lasted 5 weeks. Barely. But enough. Until withdrawal. Chernihiv survived through Soviet infrastructure and human solidarity. Both necessary. Neither sufficient alone. Combined. Enabled impossible. 40,000 surviving 5-week siege. Underground. Sharing everything. Enduring constantly. Surviving impossibly. Let's establish what Chernihiv siege actually was. What civilians endured. How survived. Siege specifications. Complete encirclement. No entry. No exit. Duration 35 days. 5 weeks. Population trapped 40,000. Originally 285,000. Most evacuated before encirclement. Remaining trapped. Mix, elderly, disabled, children. Those who couldn't leave. Those who wouldn't leave. Defending homes. Conditions. No electricity. No running water. No heat. March temperatures. Below freezing nights. Food. Limited. Pre-war stocks. Distributed collectively. Insufficient. Slowly starving. Water, melted snow. Collected rain. Underground sources. Contaminated partially. Medicine depleted rapidly. Chronic conditions become critical. Injured defenders suffer. Civilian casualties increase. Death toll 700 plus confirmed. Likely more. From bombardment. From conditions. From lack of medical care. From siege warfare's reality. Underground survival. Basements everywhere. Soviet construction standard. Deep foundations. Multiple levels sometimes. Bomb shelters. Cold War legacy. Nuclear war preparation. Reinforced concrete. Ventilation systems. Designed for weeks' occupation. Used exactly as designed. Just different weapons. Same survival function. 40,000 people underground. Crowded. Dark. Cold. Damp. Unsanitary. But alive. Protected from bombardment. Not from everything. Indirect fire can penetrate. Direct hits collapse structures. Kills occupants. But most survive. Most bombardment ineffective against underground populations. This is why 40,000 survived. Underground infrastructure. Soviet paranoia. Accidental salvation. Modern siege warfare. Historical preparation. Community survival strategies. Food distribution. Collective. Whatever available, shared. Elderly fed first. Children prioritized. Defenders sustained. Everyone else equally. Starvation universal. Death minimized through sharing. Water collection. Organized. Snow melted. Rain collected. Underground sources exploited. Contamination accepted. Death from disease preferable to death from dehydration. Medicine distribution, triage. Most critical cases prioritized. Chronic conditions managed with depleted supplies. New casualties treated with inadequate resources. Many die. More survive than would without organization. Community cohesion, essential. Shared suffering creates solidarity, or breaks it. Chernihiv, solidarity mostly held. People shared, supported, endured collectively. Individuals would have died. Community survived. This is siege survival's reality. Individual resourcefulness insufficient. Community organization essential.
Chernihiv proved this. 40,000 survived. Through sharing, through solidarity, through collective endurance. Defender role in survival. Ukrainian defenders fought 5 weeks against overwhelming odds. Couldn't win militarily. Knew this. Fought anyway. Why? Every day of resistance was day Russia couldn't use forces elsewhere. Day Ukraine survived. Day Kiev held. Strategic mission. Delay. Cost Russians. Buy time. Accomplished perfectly. 5 weeks resistance. Thousands of Russian soldiers tied down. Casualties inflicted. Time bought. Ukrainian forces elsewhere strengthened. Kiev defense succeeded partially due to Chernihiv resistance.
Defenders understood this. Civilians understood this. Both sacrificed for strategic purpose. Defenders fought. Civilians endured. Both necessary. Neither sufficient alone. Together enabled strategic success. Through tactical suffering. Through 5 weeks siege. Through impossible conditions. Through accomplishing mission. Despite everything. Strategic context of siege. Chernihiv wasn't isolated battle. Was part of northern offensive. Toward Kiev. Russian plan required. Capture Chernihiv. Secure logistics. Advance on Kiev. Didn't happen. Chernihiv held. Russian forces tied down. Couldn't advance past. Couldn't bypass safely. Siege developed. Resources committed. Time passed. Meanwhile, Kiev defense succeeding. Northern offensive failing elsewhere. Russian strategic situation deteriorating. Chernihiv siege becomes liability. Tying down forces needed to salvage failing offensive. Decision. Withdraw. Abandon Chernihiv siege. Redeploy forces. Attempt to salvage situation. This decision liberated Chernihiv. Not local defeat. Strategic failure elsewhere. Chernihiv resistance contributed. Tied down forces. Inflicted casualties. Bought time. Strategic success through tactical survival. Chernihiv's suffering had purpose. Strategic purpose. Civilian suffering bought strategic time. Terrible calculus. Effective strategically. True nevertheless. 3 questions from the beginning. Time to answer them. How did 40,000 civilians survive 5 weeks under siege? Soviet-era infrastructure primarily. Basements. Bomb shelters. Underground protection from bombardment. Additionally, community sharing. Food distributed collectively. Water gathered cooperatively. Medicine allocated through triage. Solidarity maintained under pressure. Individually, would have died. Collectively, survived. Through underground infrastructure and community cohesion. Both necessary. Neither sufficient alone. Combined, enabled survival. Against impossible conditions. For 5 weeks. Until liberation. What enabled impossible survival? 3 factors. First, underground infrastructure. Protected from bombardment. Enabled physical survival. Second, community organization. Sharing everything. Prioritizing vulnerable. Maintaining solidarity. Enabled resource maximization. Third, strategic purpose. Understanding resistance mattered. Buying time for Ukraine. Gave meaning to suffering. Enabled psychological survival. Physical infrastructure. Social organization. Strategic purpose. Combined enabled 40,000 to survive impossibly. For 5 weeks. Underground. Sharing. Enduring. Until withdrawal. What does Chernihiv reveal about modern siege warfare? That humanitarian cost is catastrophic when civilians trapped. That infrastructure matters critically for survival. That community cohesion determines outcomes. That defenders can hold for strategic purposes beyond local victory. That sieges end through strategic decisions, not always local defeats. That civilians can survive impossible conditions through organization and solidarity. That modern warfare's humanitarian dimension is terrible. That survival is possible nevertheless. that 40,000 Nkmuzas can endure 5 weeks underground, that human resilience is extraordinary, that siege warfare's cost is measured in trauma and death, that strategic purposes sometimes require civilian suffering, that Chernihiv survived against everything, teaching all these lessons through terrible experience, through 40,000 survivors, through 5 weeks hell, through emerging alive, despite everything. The lesson from Chernihiv is that civilian survival in modern siege warfare requires infrastructure, organization, and purpose. 40,000 survived impossibly, underground infrastructure protected physically, community organization maximized resources, strategic understanding provided purpose. All three necessary. Absence of any would have meant more deaths. Presence of all enabled survival. Terrible survival. Traumatic survival. But survival. 40,000 emerged alive. From 5 weeks underground. From siege warfare hell. From impossible conditions. Through Soviet-era infrastructure accidentally perfect for modern siege. Through community solidarity formed under pressure. Through understanding suffering had strategic purpose. Bought time for Ukraine. Enabled Kiev defense success. Contributed to northern offensive failure. Strategic value was real. Humanitarian cost was terrible. Both true. Both matter. Chernihiv teaches that modern warfare's civilian cost is catastrophic. That survival is possible through preparation and solidarity. That strategic calculations require civilian suffering sometimes. That 40,000 can endure impossibly. That siege warfare remains humanitarian catastrophe. That defenders can hold for strategic purposes. That withdrawal happens through strategic decisions. That Chernihiv survived. Teaching all this. Through terrible experience. Through human cost. Through 40,000 survivors. Through 5 weeks. Through impossible endurance. Through emerging alive. Changed. Traumatized. Surviving. Teaching lessons. Through experience. Through survival. Through Chernihiv. This is MilFront. We analyze battles that define wars. Chernihiv's siege defined civilian cost. 40,000 trapped. 5 weeks underground. Siege conditions. Constant bombardment. No supplies. Freezing temperatures. Slowly starving. Somehow surviving. Through Soviet-era basements and bomb shelters. Through community sharing and solidarity. Through understanding resistance mattered strategically. Defenders held 5 weeks. Against overwhelming odds. Couldn't win locally. Won strategically through delay. Bought time for Ukraine. Enabled Kiev defense success. Contributed to northern offensive failure. Strategic value justified tactical suffering. Terrible calculus. True nevertheless. Siege ended through Russian withdrawal. Strategic decision. Not local defeat. Russian forces redeployed. Offensive failing elsewhere. Chernihiv resistance accomplished mission. Through 5 weeks endurance. Through 40,000 surviving impossibly. Through civilian suffering with strategic purpose. This is modern warfare's reality. Humanitarian cost is catastrophic. Strategic necessity is real. Both coexist. Chernihiv exemplifies 40,000 survivors, 700 plus dead, city destroyed, resistance succeeded, strategically, through terrible cost, through
Human endurance. Through impossible survival. This is Chernihiv. This is siege warfare. This is modern warfare's civilian dimension. Terrible. Real. Survived. By 40,000. For 5 weeks. Against everything. Teaching lessons. Through trauma. Through survival. Through emerging alive. From hell. Into liberation. Changed forever. But surviving. Against impossible odds. Through infrastructure and solidarity and purpose. All necessary. All present. All enabling survival. Chernihiv's legacy. 40,000 survivors. Bearing witness to siege warfare's reality. To human resilience. To strategic suffering. To impossible survival. All real, all documented, all remembered. Through Chernihiv, through 5 weeks. Surviving. Subscribe to MilFront. Because understanding modern warfare requires understanding humanitarian cost. Chernihiv siege exemplifies. 40,000 civilians trapped. 5 weeks underground. Siege conditions beyond description. Surviving through infrastructure and solidarity. Physical survival, Soviet-era placement.
Social survival through community sharing. Psychological survival through strategic understanding. All necessary. Combined enabled 40,000 to survive impossibly. Against constant bombardment. Without adequate supplies. In freezing conditions. Slowly starving. Somehow enduring. For 5 weeks. Until Russian withdrawal. Strategic decision. Not local defeat. Offensive failing elsewhere. Chernihiv resistance contributed. Tied down forces. Inflicted casualties. Bought time. Strategic success through tactical suffering. This is modern warfare reality. Civilian cost is terrible. Strategic necessity is real. Both true simultaneously. Chernihiv teaches this. Through 40,000 survivors. Through 700 plus dead. Through city destroyed. Through trauma endured. Through survival achieved. Against impossible odds. Through human resilience. Through community solidarity. Through strategic understanding. All enabling survival. Teaching lessons about modern warfare. About civilian